Hello, everybody. My name is Coach Ray Z, and this is Athletic Definition. Today, I have a very special guest, Steve Maxwell. You've seen him on Joe Rogan, London Real, and if you're a Jiu Jitsu fan, you should know who he is already. He's a pioneer, and actually, he's a pioneer in all fitness. So I'm very excited to have you on here. Thank you for being, Steve. Welcome to Fireside.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Should be
Oh, no
fun.
problem. Yes, thank you. And as I was mentioning in the green room to you, I'm a fan. I've followed your work for a long time, and one thing that on all the interviews that I've seen, I've never really heard you talk about, um, like growing up. As far as like as a kid, were you active? Did you get, were you into sports? Because I know, and you did like freestyle wrestling in high school, but what about before that?
Well, I was rather unfit to tell the God's honest truth.
Really?
My father traveled a lot and he wasn't around. And it was just me and my brother and my mother. And I was basically getting my ass kicked, a lot of bullies in our neighborhood. And I was a very small boy. And my father, he was a U.S. Navy boxer during World War II. He was actually the Pacific Fleet bantamweight champ of the Pacific Fleet. That's a lot of sailors. He was pretty good. And he tried to teach us the best he could. But things really turned around for me when he bought me my first barbell set from York Barbell, which was the mecca for Olympic weightlifting and strength in those days. When you talked about weightlifting back in the 50s and the 60s, you always thought of Olympic lifting. Powerlifting did not exist as a sport. And the U.S. was actually quite a strong contender in the world and Olympic weightlifting in those days. And so my dad bought me a York barbell set. I grew up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, just down the road from York. And he would take me there on Saturdays, and I would watch the Olympic lifters work out. And in those days, bodybuilding was more like physical culture. It didn't become like this grotesque drug thing like it is nowadays. And it was a very good education. And as I got stronger, a lot of those bullies got their comeuppance. And then because I was small, basketball was out of the question. I didn't have those kind of skills anyway. Too small for football. I did play, but like second, third string. I didn't like baseball. I did try to do track and field, but too slow for the sprints. Didn't have the right kind of muscle fiber for a long distance. I did try to throw a javelin, but once again, not enough leverage, too small. But man, when I went out for wrestling, I had instant success. As a matter of fact, in the first 2 months I've been training, I beat the current junior high champ in our division. So I just had rapid success with a sport I didn't even know existed. I just went out and I just was curious, what is this wrestling all about? And I loved it right from the get-go. And then it was a love affair from that time on. And all through high school. And then I wrestled NCAA Division One. I was a health and physical education major. And I continued the bike trend through that time. And right about 1972, as a freshman, sophomore in college, I discovered the Nautilus training system, the Nautilus that had been invented by Arthur Jones, and fell in love with that whole high-intensity training system. Jones made perfect sense to me. And that's how I got my start. And around 1972, I started working part-time at this gym as an undergrad. So I had my first job in the fitness industry as a college sophomore in 1972.
Wow. So you actually started uh, doing wrestling in junior high then?
In junior high school. Yes, I did. The Carlisle school systems. And I was always one of these really good dual meet wrestlers, but I would tend to burn out a little bit towards the end of the season. Part of that was overtraining, just
Hmm.
too much. And I would start to peter out. Right when I should have been peaking, I started kind of going down. And this plagued me through my college wrestling career as well. My senior year at Westchester as a Division One wrestler, I was 18-2-1. That's a really good record. And darn, if I didn't fall short and got really sick before the NCAA championship, very disappointing way to end my college wrestling career. So, even though I had qualified for NCAA by placing in the Mid Atlantic Conference championships, I took a second place. Um, it seemed like towards the end of the season, it always just go downhill.
And you
So
mentioned
I
that
wish
you
I
felt it
knew
had to do with.
then what I know now. Just too much training, overtraining.
Do you think that overtraining was the coaches and then you doing extra work, or it was just the way it was taught back then?
It was just the way it was taught. It was like the Dan Gable mentality, You just couldn't work out enough or hard enough, or, you know, everyone would drive themselves. And a lot of guys back in the day burn out. And a lot of it was because the legend, Dan Gable, for I don't know whether your listeners even know who he is. They should definitely check him out online. I mean, the guy was a phenom, but yeah, he set the bar really high for work. He was a bit of a workaholic, and trying to match a genetic superior like him, it was just a recipe for disaster.
And then I think that's like a perfect background for jujitsu. And it with it in the age of the internet, I look everywhere, and I was trying to. There's like you can't really narrow it down, but how did you come across jujitsu? Like, and how long was it after college? Because UFC came out what, like 1991, and how did you
Well,
just hear
the
about
first
that?
UFC was 1993 in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, was it 93? Okay,
Yeah,
I
93.
for some reason I thought it was 91. Okay,
Yeah. No, there's actually the Gracie Academy actually sells the 93 collection to commemorate Royce Gracie's first UFC. But
and
after college, I wrestled the freestyle wrestling circuit, and the interesting thing is, I wasn't overtraining so much, and I continued to peak after college. I went into they had like all these open tournaments, and I started getting involved with the Philadelphia Amateur Wrestling Club, which was it was hosted by the University of Pennsylvania, and I actually had quite a bit of success post college wrestling in these open tournaments, and did better. I also found out I was pretty good at international freestyle. As some of your listeners may or may not know, the United States has its own folk style of wrestling, and it's only in the U.S. high schools and colleges that this style is competed in. The rest of the world does Olympic freestyle. So I adapted Olympic freestyle pretty good, and I was good at it. And because I was a takedown artist in college, so I actually continued to have success. I was teaching health and PE in a local high school, just outside the airport circle outside of Philly. And I, at one point, I was just getting kind of tired of dealing with kids. Teaching kids in public schools is not an easy task. So I always had my hand in the fitness industry. I was always working at a local gym somewhere, part time, just to make a little extra money on weekends and such, and of course during the summer. And I decided I wanted to go full time as a fitness professional. So that's when I made the segue into full time fitness coaching. In those days, personal training didn't exist, by the way. That was something that
yeah,
wasn't
I was
around.
going to ask you, was there even any like requirements to work at a gym? Like now they want you to have certifications.
Well, it's funny. The gym I worked at was owned by Dr. Gregory Alice. At that time, he was working on his master's degree, and he would only hire PE majors or exercise people. And he made us all read DeVries exercise physiology as a requirement to be hired on his staff. And he trained us personally himself, so that all of us were trained in under Dr. Greg. And later, then I worked in many different facilities, a place in Virginia, a place in Florida. Uh, I ran a couple places in Philadelphia as a fitness manager, and I was always looking for that activity to replace my precious wrestling. Wrestling had taken up so much of my time and my energy, and it was something I absolutely loved to do. And I couldn't find anything to fill the void. I tried Muay Thai. Actually, not Muay Thai. Bondo. Have you ever heard of Bondo?
No, I have not heard of that one.
Bondo is the mother sport of Muay Thai. It was Burmese, and they also had a grappling segment of Bondo. And it was fought barehanded with the little ropes tied around the hands,
Okay.
like in blood sport, minus
Yes,
the
yes.
glass, minus the glass. And yeah, that was the origin of Muay Thai. And I tried it. I liked it. It's a little rough. I didn't particularly like the striking martial arts. I wasn't particularly good at it. And then I did Kung Fu. I did Kempo Karate under a very, very good instructor. And I also tried regular Japanese karate. And
Okay.
none of them really turned me on that much. Then one of my ex-wrestling buddies, I was working at this place called the Society Hill Club. I was the fitness director there. And someone called me up and said, "Hey, man, there's this Sambo club in Northeast Philly. You should come on up." In the meantime, I had still been keeping my hand in wrestling a little bit. I was going up to the University of Penn and Drexel University and rolling with the guys. But, wrestling's a young man's sport. And by this time, I was in my early 30s. And, you're just a half step slow. Recovery isn't quite as good. Plus, you're a working man. And so I went to the Sambo Club. I loved it. It was great, man. It's basically a combination of judo wrestling, and it was taught by a
Hmm.
Russian immigrant. And it was really fun. But, man, it was like fighting traffic the whole way up 95 and then fighting traffic to come home. I mean, it took damn near an hour. And it wasn't that far. It was only like 15 miles, but, it took like an hour either way because of the traffic. So that didn't last long. And then I had a friend that owned a video store. It was a how to do it video. In it, the old VH, those big old 8-track tapes, And in the store, he had like, this is, before the age of the internet and all this stuff. Uh,
Right.
it was basically how to do anything, like, home repair, like how to install a sink or fix a water heater or, tile a roof or plumbing. And and then he had a fitness section, all these different fitness videotapes at the time. Of course, that was in the day of dance aerobics and it was, Jane Fonda and even
Fonda.
before her, all that kind of stuff. There's old VH. But then there was a little section with martial arts. And in it, I saw this Gracie in action videotape. This is probably about 1988. I said, "Whoa, what is
Wow.
this?" And I got that one. I got a tape by, maybe you remember the famous Joe Louis, the karate guy. Not
Okay.
not the brown bomber, the boxer, but
Yeah, that's what I was
Joe
thinking.
Louis, the movie star and karate guy. And
Okay.
I got a bunch of them. And Small Circle Jiu Jitsu by Wally J. And it was like, whoa, the Gracie brothers in action, real fights. They're Horleon and his brothers and cousins and uncles and had amassed together in this video. And I said, that looks a lot like wrestling. Man, that looks like something I'd really like to learn. And darn, if one of my old martial arts partners called me up and said, "Hey, Steve, the Gracies are going to be here on the East Coast, and they're going to do a seminar." I said, "Man, count me in." So I went to that first one, and it was amazing. I was blown away. And I had a chance to roll with Hoist and Hoyler Gracie. Totally kicked my ass. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, an NCAA wrestler, and I'm looking at these skinny little Brazilian guys. And those days, they didn't even speak English. And they just kicked my butt. And I said, man, if a little guy like that can make me tap. First, they had to teach me, what tapping was. That's the
Right.
first lesson. And I was just blown away. I said, wow, I got to learn this, man. So I started going out to the Gracie Academy. I talked to Julian, and I'd go out there. I started going out so much to California and back and forth. Oh, by this time, I had opened up my own gym. The place I was working at, Society Oak Club, the owner actually had some financial difficulties, and he had to close up. They did it like a sheriff's foreclosure. One day I'm in there working out clients, and the sheriff comes in with a couple of deputies and said, everyone out, we're foreclosing on the building. They put a big chain on the door. It's like, wow. I had just been married. I had just bought my first house. My wife had just given birth to a baby boy. And all of a sudden, I'm out of a livelihood. It was like, damn. But I had been saving my money, and I had been collecting exercise equipment. So one of my clients, a guy by the name of Bernie Spain, who owned the Spain's Card and Gifts, which was like this huge chain of gift card stores all over the country. This guy was so big, he went from like, a pauper to like a multi-millionaire in just, about 10 years' time. And he even gave seminars at Wharton Business School on, business. He was one of my best clients. And he had a space that was unrentable. It was on the second floor at 707 Chestnut Street. And it was like this raw space, really crappy. And I went in there with a couple high school football players that I knew, and we just worked for like a dog for 2 weeks, just cleaning shit out of there. We got a big dumpster and throwing stuff out the window, no building permits, probably got in big trouble from the city. But we cleaned that place out. And then I had all this hammer strength equipment and free weights and all this stuff in my basement of my Philadelphia row home. And I pulled all that stuff in there, and I set up shop. And that was the start of Maxercise. And then right at that time, I put mats in the back. And that was the first Jiu Jitsu school in the Eastern Seaboard. First one, Maxercise. No one else.
Wow.
No Renzo Gracie, nobody, man. There was no Marcelo Garcia, none of the guys in Florida. That was all after. And, I was a freaking white belt. I mean, what did I know? But I knew I was a wrestling coach. I was a physical education major. I knew how to conduct classes, and I knew how to conduct practices. So I organized it like a wrestling class. And I just taught what I knew. And then, of course, Jordan came out with the videotapes. In those days at the Gracie Academy, it was one big happy family, All the Gracies were together, When you went to the Gracie Academy, there was Orion and Hoist and Hoyler, sometimes Holker. Master Elliott was there quite a bit. Hickson was there teaching. They're all teaching. It was amazing. But even
that's like a wealth of knowledge right there.
Well, my first couple of classes in '89 was in Horion's garage. He hadn't even opened the Gracie Academy yet. That's how new it was. But that was, I couldn't stay there that long because I lived in Philly. It cost me a lot of money to fly back and forth. But I had money saved up, from my teaching days, and that's what I used. Just a little savings account I built. I went through that pretty quick. And then I got mats. But having an NCAA wrestling background, I made blue belt in 6 months, and I made purple belt in a year and a half. But there I stayed. I had reached the level of my incompetence. But then, after going out there so much to California, I started bringing them to Philadelphia. And my ex-wife, DC Maxwell, she was the third American woman to get a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, the first one to be certified by the Gracie family to teach the women's rape safe. In those days, they called it rape safe. Now it's called Women Empowered. She was the first person to get her instructor certificate from the Gracie family. And she was a genius when it came to organizing stuff. So she organized all of these seminars for Horian and Hoist. I had a tie-in down in Atlantic City at the Tropicana casino, and we would do these huge seminars down there. Man, we get like 80, 90 people sometimes for a seminar. And then I started having little seminars at my place. And then my jiu-jitsu business expanded so much, I had to renovate and rent the whole second floor above where I was. There was a ground floor, which was a dollar store. The next floor was my personal training studio with a mat area in the back. But then I expanded, and I had almost 2,500 square feet at one point of mat space and over 250 students. I was pretty much the only game in town.
Yeah, that's amazing. I knew that you were the first to open up a jiu-jitsu school. I just didn't know you did it as a wipeout. That's even more amazing. And
Well, what
and
else was
then
I going to do? There was no one around. So I just
right.
took my coaching experience and I would study the videotapes and I would go out, I would learn a lot of techniques and moves and ideas, and I would bring it back. And then I would teach what I knew to the best of my ability. And of course, I was very upfront. Look, I'm just a beginner too. I called it practices. And we would practice. But hey, we got pretty damn good. We had people come in from all walks of life. And, the Gracies had that Gracie Challenge. Maybe you heard about it.
Oh,
Orion
yes.
started it back in the 80s. We had people come in and want to fight us. Swear to God. And we never backed down. We'd fight. We had many fights. I put it on videotape. I had a tripod, a little camera, you know. But people that don't know grappling, it was pretty easy. But boy, you get some tough wrestlers, some judo guys. Woo! You knew you were in for a long fight because you would end up usually if the guy was big and strong, you'd be fighting off your back, and not quite as easy to submit people when you're a blue or purple belt. None of us were named Hoist Gracie,
And
but
you mentioned that your wife, or at the time, was like one of the first. I was trying to
the
check to
third
see
woman,
the
third.
third, and there's
She's
different
one of the
literature.
original Dirty Dozen females.
And what about you? Because one article said that you're like the third, and another one said you're the
No,
first,
no, no,
and
no, no, no,
I
no.
couldn't figure it out. Like,
No, no. There was a bunch of guys that got black belts from the Machados. The
hmm,
Machados were cousins of the Gracies. Horion had a big seminar with Chuck Norris in the late 80s, and he just needed help. Chuck had gone down to Rio de Janeiro, and he was very impressed with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Legend has it, I haven't confirmed this, but I've heard this story, that Elio Gracie choked him out, the old man. And
wow.
he was so impressed, like, whoa, this old guy can do this to me. He wanted everyone in his karate organization, which was huge, to be at least a blue belt level. And I thought, wow, it's pretty remarkable. Oh, it shows a lot of open mindedness on his part. So Horian said, okay, he brought all his brothers, his cousins, you know, and then Horian was that the money that Horian got from that seminar in Las Vegas, he was going to use that to bankroll his new school, and he was going to open up on Old Carson Avenue there in Torrance, California. And just before he opened up, the Machados jumped ship. Chuck decided to bankroll them instead of Horian and set them up, and that's how they got into the movie business. You
Oh,
saw they did a lot of fight choreographies, and they were even in some movies. And that one movie where I forget one of the Chuck Norris movies, Higan Machado is one of the guys that Chuck fights.
yeah. Actually, I remember seeing one of the Machados on Joe
It was
Rogan
called
talk
the
about
Octagon. Octagon. If you look closely, you'll
Octagon.
see him. Yeah,
Yeah, he said he bought him basically his first studio so that he
yeah,
could
yeah.
so that
Chuck
Chuck wouldn't have to
bankrolled everything.
drive. That's fascinating. And then
So
I
that was a bit
I
of a rift. In jiu-jitsu, there's all these divorces, and so Horleon was undaunted. He still had his brothers, and he opened up the one in Carson Avenue, and I started going there. I started going out so much, I started staying at Horleon's house, and then later, Hoist got his own place. I started staying with Hoist, and I'd bring Hoist out, and he'd stay with me sometimes for a month. One time, I taught Hoist to drive in the snow. He'd never actually seen snow, and he'd never driven in the snow. And we had a big Philly snowstorm, and I was so worried because Hoist was a little wild, man, and here he was, first time driving in like this very deep snow, icy conditions. It was very fun. He made his first snowman with me in front of my house.
so then are you like in the top 10 first black belts in the United
I was
States? American?
I was Helson Gracie's first black belt,
Okay.
and I was the first black belt. No, actually, that's not true. Craig Kukoc was the first American to get a black belt from the Gracie family. I believe I'm the second person to get a directly from the Gracie family, and they were very demanding and very exacting. And you could not just be a sport jujitsu player. You had to know the entire self defense system, and you had to be able to teach it. You had to
Hmm.
not just know it, be able to impart that knowledge. Because there's plenty of guys that are good at jujitsu, but not so good at teaching, breaking it
Right.
down. And there's some guys that are great teachers and not so good at doing it. And then you have people that are kind of in the middle, pretty decent and good teachers. So I like to put myself in the middle. I was pretty good at one point when I was younger. You know, I'll be 70 this year, so I'm not a young
Yeah,
guy.
you're like your birthday just passed in December, I think.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm in my seventh decade working on it now. And
And then
but anyway, yeah, I had to have been one of the first. I know I know I was Helson's first black belt in America, but there's I don't believe there was anyone else that got a black belt before Craig Kukoc from the Gracie family. There have been some Machado black belts,
hmm.
but
Oh,
Horian was
that's
so
fascinating.
demanding that, oh my God, you had to really, really jump through hoops, Maybe you heard of Richard Bressler that wrote the book Worth Defending. Is really making quite a splash on the internet.
Hmm.
Have you seen that book?
No, I have not that one.
Richard was student zero from Horian. When Horian was still waiting tables and, doing all sorts of odd jobs in California uh, before he started doing jujitsu as a business, Richard was his student. In fact, he was Horian's roommate when Horian first came. And man, when I was at the Gracie Academy, Richard had already been doing jujitsu for 16 years and still a brown belt.
Wow.
That's how demanding Horian was. And he finally got it, but he had to go to Fabio Santos.
And
It was hard to get a belt from Horian. Man,
yeah, I mean, from the way you describe it, and I don't know. When I was in school, I didn't like history, but now I love to hear the history of the evolution of pretty much everything. So thank you for that insight. And then looking at your bio, I saw that you also worked for the U.S. government, or not. You worked. I don't know if they hired you just temporarily. The DA, Secret Service, FBI. Was that to teach jujitsu or something else?
jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
One of the things that Horian really emphasized was that self-defense. And it looked like a lot of the schools are going back to it. Um, Probably one of the best self-defense systems for BJJ. I don't even like to use the term BJJ. BJJ is a sport.
Hmm.
Gracie Jiu Jitsu is a complete art. And a lot of people resent the Gracie family, jealousy and all that. They really did uh, pioneer martial arts here in the United States. And the whole UFC was Horian's idea. I mean, that
Yes.
was his, you know. Now, they have been doing free fighting in Brazil for a couple of decades, man, you know. And it was in a ring, and pretty much anything went. But Horian, the rings are problematic. Guys holding the ropes and falling out from underneath the ropes, and people being thrown out of the ring. He was the guy that came up with the idea for an octagon, a enclosed space. There was no escape. You're in, and you made it like this rubber coated wire mesh, like that fencing kind of stuff, and so it's soft. You can land on it; it won't hurt you. And but you can't escape. You can't. Some people still try to hold on, but yeah, that was his whole idea, and he came up with that around. Not whoa, I lost you. You still there?
Tuning in. Today's guest is Steve Maxwell. Looks like you're back. All right.
There we go. We have pretty weak internet here, but anyway, the Horton came up with his idea. I think it was around '92. He was looking for money and investors, and he went to all. At this point, I had like a little training association, and he would come and do seminars in Philly. Hoist would come. He would send various people. Kaiki Enrique, maybe you know him. Uh, he would come and teach. Always different guys coming. And he decided he wanted to do this tournament where they put all these different styles into this octagon space and let the best man win. Let's see who wins. Boxing versus judo, judo versus savate, you know, uh, wrestling versus capoeira. You know, you put them all in there. Let them do anything they wanted. There was no rules really, other than they promised. It was a promise. They couldn't be disqualified. They promised not to gouge eyes.
Yeah.
They promised not to bite. That was it. No biting, no sticking the fingers in the eyes. Everything else, fair game. Bending fingers, pulling hair, headbutts, striking the back of the head, the heel kicks to the kidneys, up kicks for any position, stomping a guy on the ground. It was all fair game, man. All fair
Yeah.
game.
Those first UFCs were exciting,
Woo.
especially because at the time, pretty much all you saw, at least that I recall, was like karate, and all the movies were like kung fu. So everybody just thought that was the
Yeah.
dominant martial arts.
What a
And I,
surprise. Like, wake up, America. There's,
yes,
there's a whole nother element to the fight game. If it's mano a mano, you know, and you get taken to the ground, you better know what to do. And that was Horian's whole point. That was his whole point that, most martial artists didn't know what to do when it became a ground fight. And I put $10,000 in with my ex-wife. At that time, our fledgling business, that was like a fortune to me, man. And but all these different investors put like a little, 10 here, 15 there, 30 there. He collected all the money. They did the thing in Denver. I was ringside. It was so exciting. It was so exciting, and it was really cool. And watching Hoist, in the end, this was a bit of a falling out. This is when Hickson decided to go his own way. Um, Hickson was quite the athlete, and Horian didn't think he was a good representation. Well, it's not that he didn't think he was. People would see Hickson and say, "Well, look at that guy. Look at the beautiful body and the muscles, and you know, yeah, I can't do what he does." But Hoist, on the other hand, he was thin, he was wiry, he did not have like big G whiz muscles or impressive physique. He was very mild mannered, like one of the quietest, nicest guys. He just didn't look like a fighter. But my God, did he surprise some people. And Horian's whole point was it was the technique over the size and the strength. And boy, Hoist sure proved that.
yes, he did. Yes, he did. And I also wanted to ask you, you know, regarding longevity, because you're into longevity, and I think I've heard you on some interviews say that people in their 20s and 30s should be able to do remarkable things, but as you get older, you want to be doing remarkable things. And there's a bunch of people now that seem to be doing remarkable things older. Do you think training's getting smarter, or we're just evolving as people?
I think it's some of it is. Some of it's gone backwards in time, you know. But yeah, one of my mentors, Dr. Gregory Ellis, used to say, "Look, anyone can be something at 20 or 30 or even 40. Anyone, you know, no big deal. That's when you're at your peak. Very few people are really, you know, do that much past 50 or 60, and even fewer at 70 or 80 or even 90.
Right.
You just it's a handful. And when they do it, it's such a sensation. You know, they're all over the internet, and you know they're like one in a million or maybe 1 in 5 million. You know, when you think of the average guy, think of I don't know how old's your father?
Well, my father passed away when I was 18, but myself, I'm 45. So,
You're 45.
yeah,
Well,
I'm in
think of
between.
guys you know over 60. Do
Right.
you know any people over 60?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and they're probably pretty average, right?
Yeah. Not in the best shape.
Yeah, that's pretty typical, right? Yeah,
Normal. Yes.
yeah. For the U.S.,
Yes.
actually, it's unfortunate, but normal in the U.S. is
Yes.
obesity. And
Yes,
it's
it
very
is.
sad that and there's a whole host of things. I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole, but yeah, it's a real obesity problem and a real health problem in this country, and people's health reserve is very low. That's why there was all that panic about the pandemic and all that stuff. I don't want to discuss that either, but
Right.
the
Right.
panic was overblown. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's every show that I have is just to try and help one person get a little bit motivation or keep going or start to work out because it's going to take a lot of people who like to work out to get the average person to work out so that we could start reversing this obesity pandemic that we're having. And I also uh, you know, I knew you were coming on the show, so I was researching some of your old interviews and literature. But before that, I had already seen a bunch of interviews. But I saw this interview you did on YouTube back in 2018, and back then you mentioned that kettlebells thing is a step in the wrong direction,
Yes,
and then
I was one of the
recently,
pioneers, and
yes,
I don't think it's a real sustainable model as you get older. It puts too much wear and tear on your body. I mean, think of it this way: Jiu-Jitsu puts a lot of wear and tear on your body. But see, Jiu-Jitsu is not exercise; it is a recreational activity, and we have to differentiate exercise versus recreation. Right? I don't look at running as exercise. I don't look at swimming, biking, tennis, basketball. These are all recreational pursuits and sports that people play for fun. Exercise is something we do to make us better at our recreations, and our exercise should protect us from injury. Unfortunately, what I found with many people, kettlebells, if they don't cause an acute injury, they cause subacute injuries and an erosion of joint health over time.
and you actually said that back in that interview, which was what 2018. But
Yes.
recently, this year, you did another interview, and I think from there, some people were like, "Oh, Steve Maxwell abandons kettlebells and saying this and that," and I'm sure they were just trying to get views. But on both interviews, you said everything's effective, even with bad form, you can get results. It's just in the longevity, your joints aren't going to hold out. So I think it's funny that people are kind of turning it around, and I know how your whole point is to be able to have longevity. So I was thinking,
I'm playing the long game.
right, right, and I actually had Steve Cotter on a couple weeks ago, and I don't know. I think just from what he was telling me in some other interviews, are you the creator of the Turkish getup?
Not the creator, but I popularized it. I brought it to Pavel's attention,
Yeah,
and I showed him
Cotter.
how to do it. And he thought it was a terrific move, and he wanted to include it in the old curriculum. Back in those days, it was the RKC, the
Right.
Russian Kettlebell Challenge, and then later the Russian Kettlebell Certification. And it was one of the base movements that were taught during a 2.5 day teacher training in kettlebells.
Okay. Yeah, because I've what Steve mentioned to me is he's like you had the wrestling background and you were good with kettlebells and you he said you showed it to him and Pavel and he was like kind of a marketing guy so he kind of took it and ran with it. I'm like, oh, that's pretty interesting because there's no historical Turkish kettlebell. So when I was
Well,
look,
yeah, there was the Turkish wrestlers used to do a similar exercise back in the day with crude dumbbells and so forth, where they'd lay
okay,
down and get back up. And even if you go back to the Roman gladiator training, they would place heavy loads in their body, and then from a lying position, a supine position, they would sit up and stand up. You know, actually, one exercise was shown in Spartacus, Blood and Sand, I think it was, that ultra violent, sexy gladiator show. That was, I think it was on maybe Showtime or no Stars. It was on Stars, and it was a sword and sandal epic type thing. It was a whole series, like 3 seasons, I think. Anyway, they had the gladiators laying down with a big log on the shoulder, and they had to get up and stand up without using their hands.
oh okay, I haven't seen it, but I have heard of that
You'd have to
series.
balance with the log. Yeah, it's worth watching. I mean, the guys' physiques are phenomenal. It's kind of like the 300 movie, except it's like a
Oh
series.
yes,
It's like, yeah.
okay.
And it was all about ancient gladiator training back in the day. They took some liberties, but I think it was pretty true, you know. But you see, here's the thing: all that stuff is well and good, but it really does take a toll on your joints and your body over time. People, they're only worried about strength or hypertrophy or maybe endurance, but they're forgetting safety and longevity. Any system that's progressive and hard enough, and provided you get recovery, will work to make you bigger, stronger, faster. But not every system is equally safe or equally sustainable over time. And if you look at a lot of the original guys that started with the RKC, it's like a litany of surgeries. Litany.
Yeah, that's one thing I
RKC, I mean, you know, I can name names. I mean, Pavel himself has had his elbow surgically operated on. One reason he came up with the program, Simple and Sinister, he can't do anything else. He was on Rogan. He says, how come you only do swings and dips? He wasn't completely honest. It's because he can't do anything else. He can't do pull ups. He can't climb rope anymore. He can't do a lot of stuff because he's all busted up from kettlebells, you know? His
yeah, I mean,
CEO, has had 9 knee surgeries.
yeah, I heard you mention that on that last
Bragging,
podcast. It's
fucking
crazy to
bragging
think
about it,
that,
man.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like CrossFitters bragging about their injuries. What is that, man? I would be ashamed of myself to get injured in my strength training. Jiu-jitsu is a different story. Submission wrestling is a different story. MMA, you're into triathloning, right? You fall off your bike. Okay, that's par for the course. You risk drowning, maybe. That's something that you deal with, and you're willing to accept those risks. Everyone going into jujitsu knows there's a very real possibility I'm going to get fucked up. Okay,
Right.
hopefully not bad, but you go in
Yeah.
there with open eyes. But man, with strength training, throwing weights and heaving sandbags and all this stuff, it's not even the best way to gain general strength. It's not. There's much safer, saner, sustainable way, and that's what I'm all about. And look, whatever floats your boat. My own daughter is a Pennsylvania state powerlifting champion. She is a CrossFit champion, and she's training for strongwoman competition. She
Wow.
loves the heavy iron, man, and boy, she's a beast. Really strong for a 128-pound female. I mean, she's benching like 205. I saw her in video squatting like 315 or 317. She's
Wow.
deadlifting 330. I mean, this is like a tiny young woman. And she does, and she's built, but she's still very feminine, very pretty too. you know. And I'm just saying, whatever floats
Yeah.
your boat. But I've had this talk with her. I said, look, man, you're young. I did all this crap too. In some ways, I'm sorry. I pretty much messed up my right shoulder, although I've done a good job rehabbing it. But a lot of that stuff very hard in the joints, and you don't even notice it. It's like smoking a cigarette, right? You can smoke for decades and not notice any problems, and then one day you're diagnosed with emphysema or lung cancer,
Hmm.
and it just didn't happen. It just does, you don't just get cancer. You build up to that over a long time. Same thing with a lot of these injuries. Every time you work out, there's like this little insult to the body. All these little subacute injuries build and build and build and build. And then one day, just something happens, bingo. Sometimes it'll be on the field. Sometimes, some of these NFL guys or college football players, like it looks like they're doing nothing, man. It's like, what? How did he pull his hamstring? He just
Yeah.
doing a punt return or you know or whatever. He just stepped wrong. Well, that injury had been building for weeks and even months in the weight room using faulty lifting technique.
And, I think a lot of people that know you know that you're a pioneer in fitness, but I think you might be a pioneer as a first minimalist too. Uh, before that was even a term, I found that fascinating. I can't say that
Yeah,
it
I'm
hasn't
surprised
crossed
to
my
find out
mind.
I was a digital nomad. I didn't even, if someone called me a digital nomad, I had to, you know, ask him what he meant. I had traveled almost pretty close to, I don't know, 14 years maybe, um, out of a single bag, pretty much going from country to country. I'd be in a different place every 10 years, I mean, every 2 weeks or so. And, many, many countries all over Europe, Scandinavia, Canada, Mexico, uh, Central America, Middle East, uh, China, Japan, Vietnam, Australia, all that is New Zealand. I mean, round and round I went. Really, I enjoyed that lifestyle. But right when the COVID started to hit, uh, I got raked over the coals for this on Joe Rogan. But I use an astrologer. Guy's never done me
Mm.
wrong. And Rogan really took me to task on that astrology thing. But man, this guy, I always meticulously planned every flight, every seminar that I would be teaching, every workshop, locations. And this guy had warned me almost a year in advance, get off the road. Early 2020 is going to be something happening. I don't know exactly what, but I see he kept saying the word martial, like martial law, which it
Hmm.
basically was. So I pulled off the road in 2020, bought myself a tiny house, had it shipped here to Port Townsend, where Teresa's mother lived. Her father had just died. She has an aged mother who was in her 80s, and she didn't want her mom to live by herself. So I didn't want to live in the house. So I bought myself a tiny house. That's what I'm sitting in now in my bathrobe. And, I rode the pandemic out here. Looks like it's lifting. In fact, I'm already planning a Jiu Jitsu for a lifetime training camp in Ikaria, Greece. Ikaria is renowned as one of the blue zones. Some of the oldest people in the world live there. I went there every year for 8 years, except for the past 2 years. I had to take a little break because of the COVID stuff. But hey, you might want to come. You're welcome.
I've always wanted to
You,
go to Greece. That's the origin of the marathon.
you could do. You could do. It's the origin of a lot of things, physical culture. You know, but you
Oh,
could.
yeah.
You could do a. You could do a podcast from there.
Yes, I've only done one podcast from Sedona a couple of weeks ago. I love Sedona, Arizona. Have you had a chance to go there?
I have the vortexes.
Yes. I have not been a world traveler like you yet, but some people say that's like one of the most beautiful places on earth. What would you say to that?
I would say it's definitely up there. I've seen some
Okay.
beautiful places. A lot of them are right here in the good old U.S. of A. I just got back from Glacier National Park about a month and a half ago. Wow. I was there in midwinter. It was pretty darn cold, but I was dressed right. I really enjoyed hiking the trails in winter. And man, the lakes and the mountains were just like breathtakingly beautiful there in Montana. And you know, but I would say Ikaria ranks right up there with some of the nicest places. It's kind of like an Aegean Maui, except it's not like lush and rainy. It's more dry, but it kind of has the same vibe, Really beautiful. And the blue Aegean Sea is just breathtaking. And of course, I loved Austria, especially in the Alps, the
Mm.
pre-Alps. I used to go to this little place called Voglerbrook, beautiful little place, and I would stay there. I had a friend there, Dominic Fleischel, and he had this nature training group of guys that like to train out of doors, and we'd work together. But this whole episode started um, right about early 2000s. My building where my gym was got condemned by the city because it was really old. It was an old textile manufacturing building, and it had been built in the 1800s, and it was kind of crumbling. And they wanted to raise it, but the landlord decided to renovate it. But damn, it took almost like more than a year. In the meantime, I had to move all my stuff out to another temporary location. Oh, what a nightmare! We had been there for like 16 years, and oh, terrible. Really put a stress in the marriage. And there's some other crap going on, and so we separate. Um, I went out. I always wanted to live in a camper van, like a real nomad, like a van guy. And
Yeah.
I had a pro baseball player that used to play for the Phillies. He's actually he's like the manager for the Cincinnati Red baseball team right now. His name is Dave Bell. Played for Philly. He played for San Francisco Giants. He was a client of mine for years. And so he wanted me to come out and be his personal trainer, just his. And I said, hell yeah. So one of the conditions of appointment was he bought me this kick-ass uh, uh, Dodge Sprinter van that's all, you know, kitted out by Westphalia. So it had all this German engineering. Of course, the Dodge Sprinter is basically a Mercedes. Same thing, made in the same
Oh
place
yeah.
in
I've looked into
Düsseldorf.
those. Yeah.
Man, I love that thing. I loved it. I lived in there for about 3 years. It was fun. And I drove across the U.S. 8 times, eight from coast to coast, 8 times.
Yeah.
North, middle,
Th-
lower
those
middle.
adventures of traveling to me, I I I'm gonna say you've been one of like my inspirations. I've told people about you. I'm like, yeah, this guy just travels the world and he just takes his backpack and as long as he has his laptop, he could see clients. And I'm like, that's something cool, something I want to do. I'm like, he doesn't own
Not
possessions, and
even a
people
laptop,
looking at me weird. No
an
laptop.
iPad. I don't even know how to
Oh,
use a computer. I was
oh,
I
okay.
was I was about 50 when I had my first cell phone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this digital age went right over my head. But Apple products were made for guys like me. They're
Yeah,
easy, even a monkey can do this stuff. I see like babies like 6 months old manipulating iPads, and so it was perfect for a guy like me. But I've made a whole business online with online personal training, fat loss programs, conditioning for specific sports. Um, I do Zoom sessions with people. I have people all over the world. I'll do one-on-one training right in their living room. A lot of people, even without the pandemic, a lot of people don't like gyms. I don't even like gyms anymore. Even though I owned and worked in gyms for years, they're not really all that conducive to a good workout. And I've really gotten into isometrics recently, the last couple of years. Man, what a great way to train. And you can really concentrate and focus. And I'm not talking about these 6-second isometrics. I'm talking about time static contraction. Each uh, contraction is 90 seconds.
oh, wow.
90.
Okay.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
prolonged. Been well researched. A guy by the name of Ken Hutchins came up with the idea. The trademark term is super statics. He was the same guy that came up with the super slow exercise system. And, in the beginning, these things were poo pooed and people wanted to tear them down. But part of the problem is in the exercise community, there's a huge disconnect between demonstrating strength and doing show off stunts and lifts and feats and competitive weightlifting versus building general strength for life, for health, and for sport. Two different things altogether. And I'm telling you, isometrics are fantastic for general strength that can be applied to almost anything. And it would
Yeah,
even help a competitive weightlifter.
that's kind of like how it is now. You have to show the throwing of the weights on Instagram so that you can get the clients to show them the more basic stuff. But they don't want to do that because they saw someone on Instagram do something else.
Well, it's very, very frightening to a lot of people. That's why only a very, very teeny portion of the U.S. actually works out. It's not very many, according to I've heard different figures thrown around. I've heard 11%. I've heard 15%. But let's say it is 15%. Let's say it's 20%. Of that 20%, the percentage actually doing any kind of real serious strength training, weight training, resistance training is infinitesimally small. And it's one of the best things you can do to delay the onset of age related sarcopenia or muscle loss. Everyone's on the aerobics bandwagon, but I'm telling you right now, distance running and cycling, that's sarcopenia type activity that will eat your muscles up as you get older.
Hmm.
Not a good activity for older people. Walking is all you need and strength training. When you
Well, I'm
start
hoping
getting
I
in
could
there
be one of those
jogging and
freaks of
walking,
natures.
well,
I
my dad was a marathoner. He was still running
okay.
marathons at 93 years old. But man, he was skinny and he lost all his muscle, all of it.
There's and I'm gonna be having him on soon. His name's maybe you heard of him, Dean Karnassus. He's actually I think from Greece. He's like one of the bloodline descendants of I forget one of those like the 300 guys, and
Oh, wow.
he's like
Cool.
59 now. He's come out on the History Channel Superhuman, but
Young man. Young
he
man.
runs insane mileage. Like he ran across the United States after doing 50 marathons in 50 days, and he was just like in Australia. Like he ran all of Australia.
Yeah, I've heard of this guy. He is a real phenom. But here's the
And
thing: there's always going to be genetic phenoms. There's going to be guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger. There's going to be at the other end of the spectrum in endurance, the guy you're talking about, Dean. Um, but you can't base your program on genetic superiors.
right,
He's one in, I don't know, 100 million maybe that could do something like that. Trying to do what he does is just an exercise in frustration. It's a great way to overtrain and kill yourself. Just like wrestlers tried to emulate Dan Gable. They just drove themselves in the ground and got sick and injured and quit. So you need people need to learn moderation.
yes,
Really, truly do. Any extremist stuff is something you should avoid at all costs. That
and
includes weightlifting, bodybuilding, aerobic sports, any of this stuff. Don't try to emulate. I just saw this program by Jason Statham, one of my favorite movie stars.
oh yeah, I know him. Yeah,
Yeah, his training program is like insane, man. I mean, I would be so overtrained and beat up if I tried to do what he did. See, it would be a big mistake. He is a genetic superior, and he,
mm,
he would look good no matter what he did. And I can guarantee he would look good if he did even like a third of what he does. I mean, I've met people that don't even work out at all, and they look way better than most guys in gyms.
yeah.
You
I
know,
I've seen that all work. I think I worked at like four different gyms, and yeah, you'd always see some guy, and like he doesn't even look strong, and he could lift all kinds, and then some people just are completely shredded and have the
well,
whole.
see, that's another genetic thing. Your percent strength compared to your hypertrophy, that's genetically predetermined too. It causes a
Mhm.
lot of confusion because you have kind of thin, wiry guys with really good leverage and good muscle insertions and a predominance of fast twitch muscle fiber, and they can lift weights that look way beyond their capability. And then sometimes you have guys with pretty big muscles, but they're not lifting all that heavy. So it causes a lot of confusion that you have to train this way for this way, or low reps for strength and medium reps for hypertrophy and high reps for endurance. No, you
Yeah.
don't.
And I
You
know,
need different ways of training. And that sounds like heresy, but I got the research to back it up. Tons of stuff.
and that's
You
one of
want
the
to say on
reasons
this?
why I wanted to have you on here so you could spread that information. I have a diverse crowd of runners and jujitsu people and basketball people who listen and a little bit of everything. So I like to bring on people who can provide knowledge because yeah, there's a lot
Well,
of
by the way,
ideas of how
I kind
people
of
look.
I kind of knock running as a sarcopenia activity. I'm talking about excessive running. I still run myself.
That's me.
I don't run far, but as a martial artist and into gracie self defense, the best self defense is running like hell, man. You
Yeah,
know,
actually,
the three A's of self defense: awareness, avoidance, action. Action is the absolute last resort. I will avoid, including running. You know, but before that, you got to be aware. So, running is a great self defense tool.
then, I heard you on an interview talking about how you thought some guys were going to possibly rob you in a different country, and you went into a hotel room and you talked to the guy till you saw them leave. And I'm like, some people would just get the conception, oh, a black belt, he would just, you know, fuck them up. But I mean, you don't know if they got
No
knives or
way.
guns or anything like that, and
I was in Rio
intelligence.
de Janeiro, one of the most dangerous cities in the world. And this was after I had just won the World Master Senior black belt title. And I was celebrating with my ex wife at that time. And all of a sudden, I'm from Philly, so I'm pretty street smart. And I saw this dude tailing us in the shadows. And then anytime you know someone falling, you should always look up the street because it's called the pincher technique. These guys work in pairs a lot of times. The one guy was going to come up behind us, the other guy was going to come in front, and they were going to try to lift my wallet and my money, maybe my passport. I don't know. So I said, "Hey, man, look at that guy." So went right into the hotel, just sat down for a while, talked to the concierge, cool guy.
And I want to be respectful of your time, so I know you're gonna
Yeah,
start.
I got something coming up here. I could talk to you all night. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, but I want to make sure I do have your Maxwell online seminar going through here on the fortune cookie, but I want to, some people are just going to listen to this. So for those people listening, how could they contact you or and anything else that you're having coming up? I know you're having one, I think the 27th, mobility online.
Yes, and I they can go to Maxwell SC, S for strength, C for conditioning, maxwellsc.com. And there's a whole list of all the stuff I'm doing, all my events. And I do everything from fitness seminars to, mobility to Gracie self defense, And I have a big camp coming up in Nicoria this summer. You can read about it online. I'm terrible with
Okay.
dates, but it's going to be like end of July.
Okay,
So
no problem. I'm always lurking on your website. So uh, now that you planted that seed in my head about Greece, we'll see
here
what we
we
can
come,
do
man.
regarding that. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I would love to have you back on anytime. So thank you so much, Steve. And thank you,
Thank
everybody,
you
for
very much.
listening in.
You have a great
And
night.
you too. This has been Coach Ray Z, Athletic Definition. Good night, everybody.